like it must have been so difficult. So I can see it. I can see it both ways.
Calm your passions.
I do wonder if larger studios should be banned.
Well, it came out in 1995, so
Yeah, that's before I was born.
hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Traxion Control podcast, where we talk about sim racing, racing video games, and this week a little bit of esports. But don't let that put you off. I'm as ever Tom, also joined by Tom and John. And our main topic, and there are many other topics to discuss later in the episode, so stay tuned, is sort of the deluge of unfinished racing games that are released in recent times over the last few years. I mean, just some recent examples that have happened of late. Old School Rally came out on consoles, but I felt like the handling was unfinished, and now they're doing a play test for wheel support. Carmageddon came out, and I also didn't think the handling was finished, and now there's a beta that you can enter into after release, not before release, that can help improve the dynamics. Formula Legends has done this big, long roadmap of increased support and better collisions and wheel support, again, after release. And then there's PMR and Rennsport, which I mention every week, but we won't mention too much this time. So the big question that we'll posit is, why does this keep happening?
Before I tell you why I think it keeps happening, can I just make a very quick apology I want to change one of my answers from last week's podcast, because in the full send or dead end section of last week's podcast, I said that Le Mans Ultimate does not need new tracks. After watching the Bathurst 12-hour again this weekend, I need to see Bathurst in Le Mans Ultimate, because we need as many GT3 or current racing sims to have Bathurst as possible. I know iRacing already has it and lots of other sims have it, but please do bring us new tracks in future. Does that answer the question about unfinished games?
No.
I'm not sure it does. So I will answer what I think about unfinished games. I just think that it's because games don't need to be finished anymore because of the nature of them. So like back in the day, everything was on disc media, and games had to be completed because whatever was sold had to be a product that was worth something and was give value to the player and couldn't just be patched. Nowadays that's changed somewhat, and I think that more and more developers are leaning into the fact that you now have this ability to update a game as it goes. Therefore, games, how do you define it when a game is finished? Because you can always continue to update this game until it literally is taken off the shelves and you run out of licenses. So because of that, you think, well, at what point do you decide it's finished when it's never actually going to be finished? That's why.
I also think they're missing a trick, right? Because if you think these games get a huge chunk of their PR when the game is first released, and people like us do reviews, we make content. If we've got 15 games to choose from to live stream each week, the one that's just come out is probably the one that we're going to live stream, for example. And if you launch with, in the examples that Tom's just given, without wheel support, then none of that content will include us using a wheel and saying, oh, it feels great on a wheel, or perhaps it doesn't feel great on a wheel. But there'll be very little content kind of exposing that to those who might be interested. And so then if 3, 4, 5, 6 months down the line, they bring out wheel support, I mean, we're probably not going to go and do, for example, a review of Formula Legends in Q1 2026. Is it worth revisiting and do a piece on wheel support, right? And neither is or anyone else. Only the very kind of small indie niche, like somebody who's really taken to Formula Legends would do any content on that. So I think they're just missing a trick, that they are reducing the breadth of exposure that they're getting by sticking to quite a limited feature pool on launch.
Both are fantastic points there, and I agree with both. Yes, the switch away from physical to digital has opened up the patching, and even if you buy it in physical, you can download the patch after the fact. So there's an element of, oh, well, if we don't get it done here, we can update, but it's more than that. It's more the fact that, we can listen to feedback and improve. And then you're right, missing a trick when they release it. The key thing there as well is, like, a review score sticks with time. It's forever a Metacritic, an OpenCritic, and then if it's released in, let's say, unfinished is maybe a bit strong, but less than optimal scenario with fewer features or a few areas that hold it back, then that is factored into a review score, and it sort of sticks there with time. Now, on Steam and PlayStation, that can evolve, because ultimately there's also this weighting of game reviews over time that change. But if you're about to spend £30 or something, or $30, you might want to Google before that purchase, and it puts people off. And I also think another element of it is there'll be a certain budget attributed to a game, and if it's running late, there might not be sometimes the budget needed to finish the game before release. So then there's almost a pressure point of we've got to release it now, get some revenue in, then update the game and hope for more sales or DLC in the future.
Yeah, I think there's a clear distinction as well between a game that can be updated, i.e., or content can be added, features can be added, and a game that's in an unfinished state, as in it's not clean enough, it's not ready because it's too buggy, or there are too many issues or glitches or things that we haven't finalized. I think that it would make sense to me if you went, right, we want a clean game that works well and we can maybe add some content or features after launch, versus the situation where people are now just getting into where it's like, oh well, because we can update this with a day one patch, or we can do this, we will obviously not be too fast if certain things aren't quite working right or can still be fixed. And I think that's where there's a bit of a disconnect, because it's not that obvious sometimes on the lead up. And I agree with you, Tom, that I think there's going to be pressure commercially, because if you can release a game and it's good enough to be in public hands, why would you wait longer and longer to release it? And I think one other thing we need to bear in mind is games are far more complex these days than they were 20 or 30 years ago, or even 10 years ago, really. Just there's so much scope to do more. There's more pixels available. There's more detail. There's, you're looking at laser scans to the millimeter rather than just a couple of pixels here and there. So I think human beings haven't gotten more intelligent, or we can't do more than we could before, other than through AI and technology. But I think the scope of creation and what we can actually make is so much bigger now that things just take longer. And if things take longer, you could spend 15 years making the perfect game, or you can just say, do you know what, at some point we just have to say, let's go for it. And if one of these 1 million things doesn't work, that's just the way it is, rather than saying, oh, we'll have a perfect 1,000 things, if that makes sense. So there's a few different elements to this.
Yeah, I was just about to say, I think, John, you've hit the nail on the head there, because the 1.0 release of a game, that baseline has changed. Right, 10 years ago, could you imagine if a game released and everyone was like, well, where's VR support? And what about triple screens? And I don't think it's working on my, insert kind of like edge case, direct drive, direct or belt driven wheel from, the early noughties. Like, why is this game totally broken? Whereas now everyone's like, well, where is my radar? And what about marbles on the track? And blah, blah, blah. And so the baseline for what a 1.0 is has grown and grown and grown and grown. So every new game has got a sprint to get to that point. However, I do think that unfinished as a concept can be exciting, because then you're kind of going on the journey and you're adding your feedback. But the counter argument to that is that racing gameplay is generative. In the same way as we talk about like a chat GPT, the G stands for generative. It's constantly evolving. Every iteration would be slightly different. If you asked it the same question 10 times, in theory, you'd get slightly different answers each time, because it's generative. In the same way, when you're playing a racing game, each race from the start could be a totally different story. Unlike, to bring back an example that I seem to mention every other podcast at the moment, the Mafia game that I just played, it's 11 hours of Mafia the Old Country is 11 hours of gameplay. You play through a story. If you played that story 10 times, it would be pretty similar all 10 times. Whereas if you did GT3 at Spa, despite that being incredibly cliche and overused by everyone, actually your race story could be different every single time, unless you're at the front every single time and miles away from the pack. But the point is, the racing gameplay is generative, and so in order to create hours and hours and hours and hours of gameplay, you actually need a smaller baseline of features. And I think sometimes the gaming studios will lean on that too much and be like, well, as long as you can turn the wheel left and it goes left and the accelerator works and we've got tracks and cars, that's all you need, because every race will be different. But I think, as we've said, the expectations of sim racers especially is so high now that you just to get to that baseline is challenging.
I think that's an important distinction there, because sim, if whatever you define as a simulation, has a different set of rules to the racing games. I think sim races for PC only titles are there a lot of the time for a sandbox experience or a competitive multiplayer experience. But recently there's been just a spate of racing games that have a lot of potential and a good idea and are just not executed in the right way as well. And there's less tolerance in that field, I think, because there's more of an emphasis on a quote-unquote finished product at day one, which is quite sad. I also think another element is that you have to involve publishers in these decisions. If you look at Recreation, splitting or still with THQ Nordic and going to Patreon, who knows what the payment structure is there? It's all very strange. But I also think these publishers might think, oh, if we delay it, that's very bad PR. And actually, in gaming, you're going to get heat for delaying. But at the same time, in the long run, it's better to release something finished. If you look at the Grand Theft Auto example, which we also mention all the time.
Yep, for sure. And I think there's a clear distinction as well in what we're talking about between a game that's released as a final version unfinished and something in early access, right? Which is like, that is basically taking an unfinished game and saying, well, we need the money, the public, we need to release this, but it's not in a state yet. So why don't we release it in an early access state, which is basically excuses is maybe sounds like a negative term to describe it, but it is essentially a get out where it's like, okay, we're releasing something unfinished, we're acknowledging it's unfinished, and we're renaming this whole process as something else so that we can justify you spending money on it, but not having too high expectations for what it can be, which obviously, is a massive topic in sim racing these days.
Yeah, well, speaking of topics, John, that is our next topic. So we've also talked about sort of, let's say, unfinished games with some specific examples recently and why we think that might be. And we'd love you listeners to comment on YouTube or on Spotify with your reasons as to why there has been so many sort of games that are subpar at the minute, and what sort of industry is fostering that approach. But that does lead on to early access. And we briefly mentioned it in a recent episode about if we think it's... there were some sort of conditions, wasn't there, in Full Send Dead End. But now we'll just have a quicker but more wider debate as to sort of our general feelings about early access. Good, bad, mixed, where are we at with the current state of early access releases?
I think I touched on this point last week, and it wasn't specifically for this question, but I think it does apply, is that I think early access is okay if it's really used as almost like a crowdfunding tool and the price reflects it, right? And I can't remember exactly why I said that last week, but I do think that early access at 50 quid is probably not okay. I think early access at £15, somebody who's getting in early doors and they know it's going to be buggy and they're going to join the Discord and they're going to give their feedback and they're going to help shape the game. That's fine. That's kind of what early access was for. Whereas the cynical part of me now thinks that early access is basically used as a sort of what we would call a mezzanine finance function, i.e. that it's just we think we've got another 9 months to go until this is out, but we're running short of cash, so we'll put it out as early access. As long as we brand that correctly, that will be fine. And as long as we say all the right things about we're bringing the community on board to shape this into what you want it to be. Like, the cynical part of me thinks that is basically all it is. However, there are some early access games. There's a couple that I've been involved in, like on Kickstarter campaigns and stuff, and I absolutely love getting all the dev updates about, how they're in this tiny little shared office space and they're doing this motion capture to create their characters, and all that sort of stuff is brilliant. But I do wonder if larger studios should be banned. You heard it here first from it, i.e. if you've got a certain budget, a certain headcount, a certain valuation to your company, you should be banned from early access because you should be budgeting properly. And if people are going to be spending 60, 70 quid on your game, they should get 60, 70 pounds worth of game right then. It's not a subscription service. Anyway, that's my rant. I was going to start off by saying a much more balanced argument about how early access is actually a great thing and is misunderstood, but I kind of talked myself out of that argument almost immediately.
First of all, we need another klaxon for CEO talk because mezzanine finance structure. But that's such a good point because, and you've made me think of something that I was going to say something slightly different. But so there's Wreckfest 2 in early access right now. Now, the first Wreckfest sold well over 1 million copies on multiple platforms. It's got THQ Nordic as a publisher. I understand they want feedback from the community, But controversially and cynically, I felt like that game did not need to be in early access. They could have had a free private beta, for example, to test the online. But that's going to be a full price game with it has a profitable predecessor. So, okay, unless they've run out of money, which you had to tell, but I don't think they have, then that is something that I would have liked to see not be in early access. And the reason for mentioning that in particular is that the early access price raised last week. I understand that model, but it wasn't that cheap of an early access either, like you were saying, Tom. So there's that. And then another element that got me struggle with early access at the minute was Tokyo Extreme Racer, which is a single player story-driven experience. And when I've played that in early access, now I've had to restart that whole experience again. Now it's reached version 1.0. That has not ruined, but it has negatively impacted my experience because I should have waited until after early access. There we go.
Your second point, Tom, is exactly what for me is the main thing. And I totally get that, and I totally agree that we shouldn't be having early access games at a very high price and all of this, and that the big studios maybe shouldn't. But I think it's, to be honest, more about the type of game and the type of experience than it is about the price, than it is about the size of the studio, let's say, or things like this. Because for me, if you've got like an online only game that's very much, there's a feature that's repetitive and you play it through and it's every single, as you said, a generative game where every single experience is different, then early access is okay because you can essentially trial out the features and test out how they are and improve on things and get some feedback. The problem for me comes as soon as there's any form of progression or any form of single player experience or narrative driven element to your game. Suddenly then early access kills it for me. Like, I do not want to have early access to a career mode structure that's actually meant to be interesting and exciting for me going on, because they might change it. They might tweak it. They might reset it. It might be wrong at first. It's the whole point is it's early access. It's not finished yet. And especially with a story driven mode, I do not want to play through a story in early access. I want the game to be finished so I can enjoy it. And just quickly on that as well, for me, one of the most important things about a gaming experience that has any sort of story or narrative is that first playthrough, that first week of playing it. So as soon as you're launching something and you've played it for 6 months and then this thing happens or there's an update, I've lost that initial excitement and buzz about, oh, what is this game going to be like?
Yeah, just really quickly on there. Just to clarify my points and how it fits in with you there, John, is that I'm saying Wreckfest 2, I don't think should have been in early access, but the way they've handled the early access, other than maybe the initial pricing, has been very good because the story career element isn't in there at the minute.
I think maybe the early access thing has been overdone, perhaps. Yeah. Maybe that's a bit extreme.
No, I agree.
But I really think it's for edge cases. It's for indie studios that couldn't afford to do it otherwise. That, if you're a backer and you're doing early access or a Kickstarter campaign or whatever it is, you want to know that you're helping a really small group of really passionate people who couldn't afford to do this without you, as opposed to we're just helping the balance sheet of some huge publisher.
I feel on so many terms there, I agree with what you're saying. And I think I did fully agree with everything you're saying. Then there was a curveball last October in the shape of Assetto Corsa Rally. Assetto Corsa Rally is not it's not coming from a small unknown title or publisher or development studio. I mean, it is an unknown development studio literally, but it's still, it's an Assetto Corsa title, all the usual stuff that comes with that. And that's an early access title, but it was such a good core experience on day one. It's almost like let's call it a demo, right? The first stage you drive on that game, because there's such limited content. That to me was just such a big wow moment. Like, we still got our wow, this is insane moment, even though it was early access. So that, first of all, made me stop and think, because I'm with you. I'm the kind of person that goes, this is not, early access does not give me that same buzz as, wow, this is an amazing full experience. But then it comes back to that whole discussion we had earlier about whether a game is buggy and there's issues and all these features, or whether they can just add content and features in future. And Assetto Corsa Rally doesn't really fit any of those molds because it's a rally game and the experience is doing the stages, but the actual game modes and stuff like that, there's so many different ways you can enjoy a rally game. So it's just it's basically muddled me up a little bit.
Well, is Assetto Corsa Rally the exception that proves the rule?
I think no. I disagree, and I think it shouldn't have been early access in any way. Because
because it's totally different takes. I like it
because it is a solid experience. So let them finish the game, because now what's happened is oh, we're going to have roughly monthly updates. Okay, the last update was in the middle of December. It's the middle of February now. So now, all of a sudden, positive sentiment is turning a little sour because they are not on the early access timeline that the people were expecting. But the core experience was effectively not finished, but solid. So I was like, wait till it's done. Could be wrong.
When you say it doesn't need the early access, do you mean they should release it now as it is with little content?
No,
or
no,
delay
no.
the whole
Wait,
release?
delay the whole thing. Yeah.
Okay.
We didn't know about that project, so I was none the wiser.
Yeah.
So
No, that's fair.
surprise me with 2 weeks before launch. Here we go. We're doing a rally game.
But imagine you're sitting on this amazing thing that feels great, and you're like, oh, but then you hear
Yeah,
that
but-
the WRC official game's coming out next year with Nacon, and oh, what if that? Now's the chance. We were all screaming for months about how rallying is in a bad way. We've EA Sports WRC is not being continued, and there's a massive gap in the market for someone to create the new RBR. Who's going to do it? Imagine if you were just sitting on this gold dust. Like it must have been so difficult. So I can see it. I can see it both ways.
Calm your passions. Finish the game.
I'll mute my mic.
Pragmatist.
I hope you're all enjoying this video. Just a quick message though for those of you using Fanatec equipment. Maybe you're looking to upgrade, maybe you're looking for new peripherals. If you use the affiliate link down in the description below, it will take you to the Fanatec website. It won't make a difference to your experience, but what it will do is help support this Traxion GG YouTube channel and of course our website. And that will help us make more content like this in the future. Back to the video.
Right, well, anyway, contentious. Love it. We're going to move on to our regular format, though, full send and dead end. And actually, this week, there might be a few more, there might be a bit longer than usual as well. Let's see. Anyway, as always, I'm going to put across 3 statements. Full send is good, dead end is bad. Agree or disagree. Put forward your arguments for each. So, we'll go through each one and then we'll circle back. So, Screamer, the upcoming game from Milestone, released in March, won't sell well, in inverted commas. Tom, full send or dead end?
Dead end.
John?
Dead end.
So Screamer won't sell well. I've got confused with my own question here. I'm going to agree with that and say full send. Okay. Sim Racing Esports is on live support. Full send, dead end, John.
Full send.
Tom?
Full send.
Yeah, I'm full send on that. And then finally, we've got Nacon Racing is a sleeping giant of racing games. It's open to interpretation as to what you mean by sleeping giant, but full send or dead end, Tom.
Full send.
John?
For the sake of it, I'm going to say dead end.
I'm going to say full send. Right, let's circle back to them then. So Screamer, which is it's actually a revival of an old series, but it's sort of pitched as a new franchise because nobody remembers the old one. This is by Milestone. I think it's been a relatively big budget and big production for them. And we were discussing if it will sell well or not. Tom, what was your opinion there?
My opinion was that because we are all men of a certain age, we're kind of looking at a lot of games through our own lenses. And Screamer, for me, is probably not one that I would go for. However, I know for a fact that my nephew would absolutely love that game. If he plays a tough game like F1, it loses interest immediately because it's tough. You've got to be patient. If you come off the track, it takes forever to get back on, and then you're miles behind everyone else, blah, 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 blah. Screamer is, I think, for a much, much younger audience. I'm talking kind of like 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds, up to kind of 16, 17-year-olds, which is obviously an enormous market. I think the art is fantastic. I think the gameplay looks fun and exciting. It's almost like if Fortnite did racing games, it would be Screamer. And so for that reason, I think that, people that we speak to every day at work, probably less likely.
Apart from Martin.
I do think it will sell well.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I think that yes, the hardcore sim racing community, which are very strong will be strong on the Traxion channel, because anyone who's really into racing games and passionate about sim racing is very actively and openly and outwardly passionate. So it maybe sometimes seems like anything that's not a hardcore sim is not going to be as popular. But there's such a wider demographic to aim for with Screamer. It's a returning series that was very successful already, so there's a bit of the nostalgia factor. Although I would say that the age of people that were playing Screamer, I'm going to offend everyone here that's listening.
Well, it came out in 1995, so
yeah, that's before I was born. So you'd have to have been already playing racing games, and anyway, I'll stop there. But as Tom says, I think the younger folk who won't have the nostalgia factor might be drawn in by the high action, the high speed action, the color, the anime, the massive wings on the great looking cars and all that. I don't think it will. I don't think it will sell as well as maybe Hot Wheels Unleashed, which I think was very well for a milestone title. But do I think it will sell well for a milestone game relative to their whole collection, i.e. the ride games, the motorbike games? I do. I really do. I think it's a bigger demographic, and there's enough intrigue there that if it's decent, it'll sell well. And then if it's decent, we'll determine whether a second one would sell well, for example.
So I've said full send. I think it won't sell well. And now, you've both made some good points there.
Yes, that is the point of this show.
Stick to your principles, Tom. Why is it going to be a flop?
So there's a little bit of there's a little bit of Test Drive Unlimited here. Solar Crown, which I think it dented its sales potential because it was rated 18. And it was rated 18 because they put a casino in there, right? Which then didn't arrive till 18 months after release. So it was an 18 rated game, but the part of it why it was rated 18 wasn't in there. Screamer is rated as 16 because the Irish character swears a lot. And I do think, that Milestone's big success was Hot Wheels. And this it has a higher age limit. So there's a little bit of that. I also think
think that makes much of a difference in reality?
Well, I have to be careful here because I think, yes, absolutely it does, but I don't think it does. You're right.
I think it does. I think it does for...
No, but you can't do ID checks on 16
element.
Rated games, things, can you?
Hey, I'm just thinking back to when I was like 9 playing GTA Vice City.
See, that's the thing. It depends on the parents, then, doesn't it?
It does.
Or the whoever's in charge of making those decisions.
Yeah.
I think a racing game like this, though, I don't know.
You're right. It's less of a
most friends of mine who have kids who play on console, they are using my friends' logins as opposed to their own logins, right? All the games are bought by their parents, and so it makes sense. Just, do you know what I mean? It's
the Traxion podcast is not parental advice, but, I think
we should do that in a future episode. Let's do the top 5 games to buy as a parent for your kids.
Yeah.
Racing games.
Could be a good article, that. But I do think that's a fact. I think there's an element of the cartoonish looks, anime inspired, but on the cover and stuff. But it's not quite a Mario Kart rival either. Or I think it's got some really complicated mechanics, which I think is really interesting. So it's whether or not, as well, how the first few people who buy it play it, and is it easy enough, explained enough to get the word of mouth.
I get the feeling it looks more complicated than it is to play, by the way. I think it looks complex, but maybe you need to give it a chance. But then who knows?
Yeah. And maybe I'm reading into it too much, like Tom, you were saying there, like it's us as an audience. I think we've been saying, oh, look at those mechanics, aren't they complex? And other people will look at the trailer and go, it's cars, there's explosions.
Cool. Yeah.
Whoa!
So we'll find out. I want it to do well.
That should be the next review that Traxion does. Can we just have "whoa" as the text? That's it. Look at those colours.
Done. Okay, well, we'll find out later in March because we will have a review. Okay, next point was sim racing, esports, and live sport. I think we all said full send, right? But let's go to Tom. Opinions on sim racing, esports at the minute.
I do think, I'll be honest, I think you host a great podcast, Tom. I really do. I think all your questions are fantastic, but I think this one is a dead end of a question. Because I think we all agree.
It's obvious.
We all agree the same thing. Everyone in the comments is going to agree the same thing. Yeah. Where is F1? Rennsport has been kicked out of the highest tier of esports. I just, what, is there any... two things. Is there any exciting sim racing esports happening? And did I say A or one? Because I can't say one and
two
then
things.
B. Two things, right? And B, does it matter? Does it really matter? There's plenty of motorsport to watch online. That's great. You've got F1, Formula E, World Rally Championship. Take your pick. We don't need it. We just don't need it. It's not exciting. I'm not interested in it. I think if Le Mans Virtual sorts itself out and comes back, that would be great. If we have just one event a year that happens to be Le Mans Virtual because Max Verstappen takes part again, so be it. If it doesn't happen, does it really matter? Not for me.
I mean, I think it's it's more about the perception of sim racing esports as well. It's like, I think the reality bubble has kicked in, or the false reality bubble has burst, I should say, because I think we all got excited about how big it could be based on a couple of things that happened, and obviously what happened during COVID and all this stuff. And I think it's more like it's leveling out to a way, because basically we're realizing that actually, do that many people really want to watch it? Only if there's a good reason to, only if they can really get behind the drivers and really understand the story. And it's just hard to see with sim racing esports how the drivers get all of that across with the nature of the competition. Like, how do you create a big narrative through it? Well, to be honest, that's what content creators do. They create their own narrative, and people watch to support them. So it's up against content creators, but as I've always said, it's up against real racing, as you alluded to, Tom. Why would I watch esports over real racing? Well, it's not because of the excitement of watching cars go around and the kind of thrill and adrenaline of it. So it's got to be for the narrative, for the story, and for the quality of the racing. And it's just so hard to get all of these things together. And I think that's it. It's just not exciting enough for enough people.
There's another factor as well, which I think in sim racing, unlike real world motorsport, you can participate yourself, right? So I think it depends on what you define esports, but I do think participation is a great thing on the rise. I know iRacing's Daytona 24 didn't have a higher number of drivers this year versus last year. Quite interesting. Although more teams. And that is broadcast. And I think there is a thing of, if you have these big quote-unquote special events or mass participation sim racing events, and it is with the top split has got commentary and there's a sense of achievement around that, that is, to me, the future. I think the ability to earn a living full-time from sim racing esports is diminishing.
Question. Of the, I think if I remember rightly, it's something like 24,000 drivers or something like that. Am I close?
Something like this.
So it's something like 24,000 drivers. Of those 24,000 drivers that took part in the iRacing event, what percentage of them do you think could name any of the drivers that finished in the top 3 positions in Split 1?
Oh, 0%. Yeah.
Well, maybe not 0. Maybe 0.
I think 0.
0.001% perhaps.
Yeah,
but
rounding to the nearest.
Max wasn't there, so they don't know.
But this is the thing, right? I think you've absolutely nailed why sim racing esports isn't exciting, because the excitement is in the participation, which you just can't do in real world motorsport, right? Most of us can't afford to go racing to any decent level, and so we can only live vicariously through our heroes, right? Whereas actually we don't have to live vicariously through our heroes in sim racing. We can do it ourselves, and so participation is the exciting thing. And I think the iRacing special events are great because they've built up this sense of you're taking part in something that matters. Yes, it's broadcast, but I don't know if that's necessarily the reason why it's exciting, because okay.
No, it's just one element.
Second question then, to follow up to, maybe kind of add some balance. What percentage of the 24,000 people who took part in that event watched either the full or highlights of the Split 1 event?
I think it's a small percentage. Yeah, but I still think there's a value in that, because especially if you make it to top split, it's like something to aim for. Oh, if I make it to the top split, I also get to be part of a co-broadcast.
Totally. But I think this is the strength of sim racing, is that it's not about watching, it's about taking part, which is great for the game studios because they can sell copies. It's great for the hardware manufacturers because they can sell wheels and pedals. It's an industry that's set up for participation, so there's no need to shoehorn sim racing esports in. If there are one or two particularly good events or series, so be it. But I don't think if we see a decline in sim racing esports, that equals a decline in sim racing itself. Not at all. I think they're two totally separate issues.
Yeah, well, actually, while we're discussing this, TFCN did say on our Discord, traxion.gg/Discord, and chat away in the podcast section. Do you think the pro side of sim racing esports is crashing and dying, while the amateur side of sim racing is growing? And I think we've all agreed to that. So, thank you, TFCN. Now, Nacon Racing is a sleeping giant of racing games. At this point, I've completely forgotten what you said about Full Send and Dead End. I'll go to you, John. What did you say and why?
I just said it to be annoying. I said Dead End because I think you were both saying Full Send. I think they are an already waking up medium-sized human being of racing games. Right? I think that
what a tagline
to be
the title.
To be a giant of sim racing, racing games. Sorry. To be a giant of racing games, you have to be in a position where everything you do or release or say, everyone's on tenterhooks waiting to hear what's next, like we were with Forza Horizon 6, like we would be with Gran Turismo, like we would be with the next Assetto Corsa, for example, or Le Mans Ultimate at this stage, maybe. That's probably too far. I just think that there needs to be more. Give it 5 or 10 years, maybe, and maybe that's where you're going to argue that they're sleeping giant, but I just think that Nacon, however you want to call it, are at the moment doing a good job of being involved in lots of okay racing game projects. Some of them might be good, some of them might not be so good, but I just need to see more before I would call them a giant. And now, I mean, I literally just did that to be contradictory.
John,
so
that is the
should be
concept
down.
of sleeping giant. But anyway, Tom.
Exactly.
I think they know exactly the audience that they're aiming for and stick very true to it, which is why I think they probably are a sleeping giant, because yes, maybe they haven't fulfilled the full potential, but they are going for the console, wait for it, sim light audience, which is probably the biggest sector in our market, right? So not only are they going for it in the sense of creating those games, but they're also creating licensed and unlicensed hardware around that particular audience, right? I think they even have like a Mario World Switch 2 case that they're bringing out, right? So that is the arcade all the way to sim light, massive chunk of the racing game market, and focusing specifically on console, but also available on PC. Like, they are going for the largest chunk of the market, and recently invented the term sim light, which I absolutely love. They are not racing sim people. They're not sim racing people. They're staying well away from that market because, as we know, as we've discussed at the first part of this podcast, you have to absolutely nail your colours to the mast and release 10 out of 10 games to satisfy that particular sector. So yeah, I think what they're doing makes a lot of sense for a lot of people, but absolutely no sense to a tiny fraction of sim racers.
Yes, well said. In my opinion, Nacon, I can't remember what we were supposed to say, is the modern day Codemasters. Because Electronic Arts, for better or worse, has diminished Codemasters to just making the Formula One game. Well, Nacon is doing all sorts of weird, crazy, wonderful stuff across multiple titles. So we know that the MXGP game will return this year. There's a big announcement next month for that. The WRC game that's coming back in 2027. It did mess up on test drive. They'll be the first to know that they did that, but at least they're still supporting that for at least the rest of this year, maybe into next year as well. And then they're publishing weird and wonderful random games like Gear Club and Rennsport and all sorts of stuff. So whether or not, and there's Endurance Motorsport series, which is Simlight. So whether or not they're good or great or different games that, like you say, John, we'll have to wait and see. They are at least publishing multiple different racing game projects.
Yeah,
there's a lot going on, and there's one of the very few companies to do that still.
They also have squash courts at their offices, which is pretty cool.
There we go, sleeping giant confirmed.
I was about to say juicy take for THL, but I'm not going to call squash courts a juicy take. But it's a good bit of information.
Oh, I should also. We're going to move on quickly, but also yes.
This has been recorded after the episode. Just a note for our Northern English and American followers: squash is like diluti or juice.
We should also say, like you mentioned there, Tom, hardware, they do have the rights to make direct drive wheels on PlayStation 5. First company after Logitech, Thrustmaster, and Fanatec. So that is the big market, and they're going for that, and they'll have a couple of products this year on that particular platform, which is big for the industry, really. If they're good. Caveat. Right. We're not going to have a quiz this week. We're just going to do a rapid-fire news roundup.
Thank the Lord.
Yeah, no rally drivers questions this time, but just rapid fire news. You can find all this information in depth on the traxion.gg website and some of it on the YouTube channel. So we have the Gear Club 3. Oh, I've got the name wrong already. Gear Club Unlimited 3 review on the website and YouTube channel live right now. Check it out. Race Room is doing a test event to do with special events. They had a bit of a disaster last time, but they're coming back with a private test. Good to see improvement there. Project Motor Racing we discussed last week. I know there's lots of people in the comments that want to hear more about this game. There is a big LMDH, big quote-unquote, update for that game that came out this week, news on the website. There is going to be more updates to this game very soon, so stay tuned. And finally, Rennsport has been teasing content. There's going to be more news as we probably put this podcast out. But we are traveling to an event to find out even more about their DLC and plans for the future and get some interviews. So that'll be hopefully next week, for next week's podcast, maybe a talking point. All right. So, community question time. And this week it's the chosen one, literally and figuratively, from Discord. Do you think it will ever be possible to have serious cross-device PC and console sim racing? From my experience, console sim racing games are always on the easier, less refined handling models to attract a wider audience. Debate, John.
Yes. Yes is the answer. I believe this to be true. And I can already see an example of it with Rennsport, because we...
Whoa. Rennsport's not a sim. It's not serious. Carry on.
I thought I'd said something terrible there. Like, oh, this is secret. We don't... This thing that happened didn't actually happen. You were... Anyway. No, we did Rennsport cross-platform racing, and it was one on console, one on PC. There was actually multiple on both devices, and there was physics parity there, and it was superb. That was the one part of Rennsport that was superb. I think you would give it a very, very high rating. I had some amazing battling. It all felt very smooth, very few issues there, and that was in the very early stages as well. So basically, yes is the answer, because I've already seen it, and I do strongly believe that more games and titles will have this with physics parity in future.
I hope so. that's really all I've got. I hope so. I'm sure there is a whole load to do with game engines and how your frames per second aligns with the frequency of your physics model and hertz and blah 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 blah. And I've done a little bit of reading on it, but not enough to understand it properly. People clearly care about it. I do wonder if the advent of the Steam machine will speed up the demand for this sort of crossover, as more people are playing PC games in their living rooms as opposed to, on a desk. But yeah, don't know. Hope so. Would be good.
So I think it is possible. It's just no one's properly done it yet. I mean, if you look at the first Assetto Corsa, which is lauded as the greatest sim of all time, that drove really well on console and on PS4 and Xbox One. Now, Kunos was not able to do cross-platform multiplayer. It didn't exist at that time. But it showed that great physics can be on both PC and console. And yes, I know that there was no modding on the console, but I'm not saying that. I'm saying the fundamental experience was possible. We've also seen Rennsport. I was only joking there, John. I was putting the persona of people in the comments. People think that is not a sim because it's not very good. But there's a difference between not very good. It's still a simulation. You just don't like it. And it does work cross-platform.
But maybe the physics are more simplified to allow for that. I'm not sure, the technicalities.
Well, that is what we don't know, and there's a lot of assumptions about that. But I do think it drives well enough with certain cars, and it is a simulation. And Project Motor Racing, it is a simulation, and it does have the tyre model working on PC and console. I don't like it. Sorry for the people who really like that game. Different opinions make the world go round. But it is possible. So the chosen one, I think it's a great question, because actually I just don't think people have pulled it off on a solid game yet. And we go back to Assetto Corsa Evo, which might be good in the future, but we don't know. And it will be coming to console. We don't know if they'll ever do cross-platform. So anyway, let us know again, those listening, to your opinions on this great question in the comments. That's the end for this episode. Do review us on Spotify. Give us a like and subscribe on the podcast Traxion Control YouTube channel, and don't forget that now we are available on YouTube Music as well. So if you don't have YouTube Premium and you want to play it through your car's Android Auto or Apple CarPlay, you can use YouTube Music app and listen to the podcast there. Thanks as ever, Tom and John. We'll be back next week with another one.